Welcome to ABA Business Leaders, brought to you by 3 Pi Squared, where we discuss topics on how to create and grow an ethical and sustainable ABA practice.
Whether you're starting, scaling, or thinking about selling your business, we're here to share insights, stories, and strategies to help you on the journey.
We owned a successful ABA practice for over 10 years.
And now we help other ABA business owners do the same, without all the chaos.
Stick around, you're in the right place. All right.
Welcome to ABA Business Leaders Podcast, brought to you by 3 Pi Squared. I'm April.
I'm Steven.
And this episode is going to look a little different. It's a Podswap. We were invited to be on Allyson's podcast, Sidekick Learning, and she interviewed us. Really, it was all about this guy's new book, if you haven't checked it out. But she asked us a lot of really great questions. Oh yeah, here it is, the book right there. She asked a lot of really good questions about our origin story. And I don't know, it was really cool. I enjoyed being on her podcast, and I enjoyed being on the receiving end of the questions for a change. And so we thought that if we really enjoy having conversations with Allyson, and we've been on her podcast in the past, back in 2025, and she's been on our podcast before. And we have a lot of our values are in line, and we see eye to eye on a lot of things in our field. And so we thought that if you enjoy listening to our podcast, you would also enjoy listening to her podcast. Her podcast is more on the end of, is a little more clinical minded, and a lot of her focus is on supervision and things like that. But why don't you, after you take a listen to this episode of us on Allyson's podcast, then why don't you go over and check out her podcast? The link will be in the show notes, and give some of her episodes a listen if you haven't already. So yeah, well, on that note, I hope you enjoy this episode.
Bye-bye.
I feel really strongly that you shouldn't open and run an ABA business if it's not going to be profitable enough to not just get by, but have enough money to then be able to pour back into your team to be able to provide training. Because I think that's one of the biggest problems that I see, is that as a whole, we're not putting our money back into the system for training, because we can't do it for training, right?
Hello, welcome everyone. I am joined here today by April and Stephen Smith of 3 Pi Squared and the ABA Business Leaders podcast. We are going to be talking today about their story and kind of evolution of their own ABA practice and what that journey looks like. They now work very closely with many different ABA businesses, helping them on all sorts of different fronts, from operations to just even getting set up initially. And so we are going to talk through both lenses of that in terms of their own personal journey and kind of some of the trends and things that they're seeing with the folks that they are working with. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I would love to kind of just jump in and hear a little bit about your story. And for those that have not listened, we have a previous episode together where we have talked a little bit about just ABA business in general, but I don't think we really dove into your own experience from start to finish of what that looked like in terms of building your practice. So I'm curious about sort of the origin story there. What led you to initially begin your ABA business?
Yeah, you want me to go over this one?
You can start it.
All right. So I've been in the field of ABA since 95. I was a college student, and my speech professor had a child on the spectrum and was actually, this is like so different from how we do things today, was like giving extra credit for students that would come learn about ABA to potentially help out her daughter, right? So that was my first intro into ABA. And so it evolved and grew from there. And I was a behavioral specialist before the BCBA was even a big thing. Yeah. And currently I'm a BCBA, and we had moved to Northern Virginia from South Carolina, and I interviewed at multiple ABA practices around the Northern Virginia area. And if anyone knows anything about Northern Virginia, it is nothing but a traffic gridlock all around the DC area. Mm-hmm. And so I interviewed in Maryland and DC and Virginia, and I finally got a job, and I was driving more than I was seeing clients, and I wasn't really happy. I was really disappointed. I was expecting such an urban area to be so far ahead in ABA and was expecting so much, and found out that it really wasn't what I was hoping for. Mm-hmm. So Stephen and I were on a walk around our neighborhood, and I was talking about all my frustrations. And in the background, I had always had a dream to start my own ABA clinic of some sort, right? I didn't know what that was going to look like. And he said, well, let's do it. We'll start our own. And I'm like, you're so funny. But in true fashion for Stephen, I'm like the dreamer, but not necessarily the action taker. It takes me, I have to research and have I'm a planner. Also, I'm a dreamer and a planner. And this guy's like action man, mm-hmm. right? And so he's like, let's do it. Let's dive in. And I'm like, well, we don't know what we're doing. He's like, we'll figure it out. So we figured it out. During the life of our company, the insurance mandates became a thing. Yep. So we learned the whole world of insurance, and the BACB became a thing. So I went back to school just to get my BCBA, thinking I'll get this first and then I'll continue on and go get my BCBA. And I never made it there because all my time was into, building what we had. So we ran that company for 12 years.
Yep.
And along the way, I'll let you take over for this part of the story, but along the way, as we were growing and deciding and moving and changing and all of the things that you do as you are scaling your business, Stephen decided to start 3 Pi Squared.
Yeah. So I still had my full-time engineering job. And in 2014, because we were all self-pay, and then in 2014, the insurance mandate came in and we were kind of forced into insurance land. And so we knew nothing about it, but they did require a certain number of policies and procedures and things like that. And that's kind of my wheelhouse. I was doing quality or internal auditing for aerospace and automotive. And so I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. And so I made this quality management system for April, and we passed these audits. And then we started hiring BCBAs, and I quit my job in, I don't know if it was June, I think. Yeah. And like a week later, we found out April was pregnant. And I was like, what did I just do?
Wow.
I had like 8 weeks of vacation a year, and I had like $5 copays, and now we have no insurance. And it's like, what? And so that first year was very stressful. We had set aside like $100,000 as our nest egg. And that was like, once we get to that, I can quit. And we blew through all of that money, right? Like all of it. And we were like panicking about what we were going to do. And I was doing the insurance billing horribly, right? Like I remember the first claims I submitted on the CMS form, it has like a start and an end date on one line. So I was like, oh, well, I can put all of the tech codes on one line for the entire month and then just submit it. Hey, piece of cake. No, you can't do that. So, it was just learning by trial and getting a little bit of help on Facebook. And it was just chaos and madness for the first 6 months to a year, right? Along with having a brand new child. I can remember April was upstairs with our child, and Kaiser was doing an in-network audit in our in-home office. It was quite insane that first couple of years.
We often wondered, what did we get ourselves in?
Yeah. It was pretty terrible. And like I would be waking up and at 2 and 3 in the morning in a panic. Did Aetna pay? Right? Did we get that authorization in? Right? Like it was just it was really. And I would wake April up and say, hey, Did you get that email? Like, what are you going to do about this? Right. And she's like half asleep. Like, is this a dream or is this real? Right. And yeah, it was very stressful for us. I did not make it better. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And we turned this into a successful operation, right? We opened up a clinic. It was 4,000 square feet. I think we had 50 to 60 employees, within 3 years. I was getting ready to open up clinic number 2. I'd already picked the clinical director for it. And April was like, what are you doing? Right? Like, I never wanted to get as big as we are. This is way too big for me. And so I then focused my energy on 3 Pi Squared. And that's My first customer was in Georgia, and she still comes on our podcast regularly. And yeah, that's how I got started. She needed some policies to pass an Optum audit. And I was like, we did that. And that's how I got started. And now we work with 1,600 ABA practices all over the country, which is insane to me, right?
And yes, we help them do things the way that we wish. We help provide for them what we wish we had, because a part of why I didn't want to grow is because I was a micromanager. I didn't know that at the time, but looking back, like I didn't know how to grow because I needed to be able to have my hand in everything. And my excuse was I need to know all my clients, support know all my clients well. Years later, looking back, I realized I just was micromanaging. I didn't know how to do it any other way. Right. And so that's a lot of what we do is help to know how to delegate, how to put your policies and procedures in place so that you can scale and you can step back. But yeah, so that's how we got going.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many threads I want to pick up on from there. So let's start with one thing that kind of stood out to me, obviously, is you had this kind of idea or vision of having this ABA business before you actually got into it. And then it sounds like you started your business at such a time that there were just a lot of evolution and change in the field in terms of the insurance mandate, in terms of the BACB. So you're navigating all of that, and that's new for other people as well. Mm-hmm. How did your expectations of what you thought the business would look like, or what your initial vision for the business, how did that square with what that reality actually looked like once you were in it and doing it and building?
I mean, I think that's part of the problem. We didn't really have a vision. And, that's something that we try to coach our customers on now is you need a vision. What do you want this to look like and feel like when you open the door? What do you want to hear? What do you want to see? Because I don't think we had any of that. I think our relationship was solid enough and we kind of had aligning goals that we made it work, right?
But not intentionally.
No. It was just, it kind of fell in place, right? We were very lucky in that. So when you're in the middle of it, of that storm, and you're hiring people and, you're having to fire people, and it's what in the world am I doing here? And so it took a couple of years for us to even acknowledge that we didn't have a solid vision. We didn't know what we really wanted out of this, right? I often tell the story. We both agreed to build a small ABA practice. My idea of a small ABA practice was 10 clinics. April's idea of a small ABA practice was 10 employees. Very different. But we were both, let's build a small ABA practice. And so I think that, especially when we're working with partners or couples that are wanting to build something, it's really important that they're on the same page, because again, there were some really hard times, right? Where we were having issues at home and issues at work. And is there even such a thing as issues that are just stay at work when you're married and you have an in-home agency? Not really, right? Especially when your husband is waking up at 3 a.m. asking about Aetna authorizations. So, that was something that we try to coach people through, right? This is going to be difficult and it's going to be messy. So we want a clear understanding of what you want, because we didn't have that when we started. And it probably wasn't until year 4 where we actually sat down and said, what is it we're building here? And how do we want it to be?
Yeah, I think my expectation was, because my focus has always been early intervention, right? My sweet spot's that birth to 8, right? More specifically, those 3 to 5 year olds, right? And so especially when we got the clinic space, we still had in-home services, but I envisioned not making a preschool, but making it preschool-like so that we could offer some preschool readiness types of services. It was important to me to really pour into early intervention. And I know that's where a lot of ABA services are, in early intervention. I know there's a lot outside of that too, but that's the main focus. But still, that's where I wanted to be. And that was what was important to me. Felt really strongly about early intervention. But what I didn't understand is that how hard it would be to find enough kids in that age range with the availability to be able to make that profitable, because profit was the last thing on my mind. I would have given away services for free, and I did. And it was very uncomfortable for me to have to like get co-pays. I just wanted to go like work on communication skills and play skills with little guys, right? Like that. And then as we grew, and that also meant supervising doesn't even feel like the accurate word, but like managing staff, right? That was beyond my expectations. It wasn't even on my radar of what that would look like. I just assumed that you just tell people what to do, or not even tell people what to do. They would just know what to do. And then you all work together. So I obviously had a very rosy Pollyanna, little version in my head. And it obviously did not match the real life.
Yeah. Well, and, I hear a lot too, the similar motivations to yours. Like you look around at the ABA companies that are in the area and, whether it's the amount of driving or other things in the way that they're structured, it's easy to think like, okay, well, here's what I want to build. And I am going to build this thing that's better or different. But I've heard a lot of stories of folks that get into it and then they're like, well, I've just recreated the thing that I was trying to avoid and get away from. Did you experience any moments like that or anything that you're like, well, I was explicitly trying to avoid this. And now I'm looking at what we've built and I'm noticing like we have accidentally created these conditions that, this thing is happening.
I think, again, this was accidentally, right? We were aligned enough that we were both like, it was more important that we provide services that we felt were good than making profit, right? And I can remember like I would have conversations with RBTs and say, I need a raise, right? And I'm like, dude, you make more than I make, right? And so like that was a big focus for us. And like again, maybe accidentally on purpose, separated myself from the clinical side, right? So it was like, I'm not involved in these authorizations. I'm not saying, hey, it'd be great if we had another 30-hour kid, right? Like it was when the authorization went through, it was whatever hours were, the availability.
That was at the beginning. There was that little bit of like, oh, well, why can't you just get 30 hours for this kid? Not like with an ethical list, but just like a misunderstanding on your end of what that really looks like. Yeah. So we did very, very quickly and very early. We were able to remedy any of those things pretty quickly before they got out of control. Like, I think we were really good. One of our family goals was like living with intention. And we hadn't recognized that then yet either. We did not, but it was here. We just didn't know it or name it. We hadn't named it yet. And so I think we were aware enough when things were getting outside of what we were trying to do enough that we were able to bring things back in pretty quickly.
Yes.
But I think too, that was also because of like me being a planner and him being a doer. Right. And so that makes a really good combo. But we did make a lot of hard choices personally, because the focus we did voice to each other was at the end of the day, we want to be able to sleep at night without worrying about, are we treating the individuals we're providing services for, wrong, or our staff. And that was the beginning, because I had a strong experience and strong skill set of working with parents too. And so I already came into it pretty strong working with parents and knowing how to have conversations with parents and showing up in a way where parents felt like they could talk to me. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I felt really good. I did a great job working with little guys. Now, teenagers and older kids, I had no idea what I was doing. And so eventually we did hire someone to be able to take those caseloads. But what I didn't know was like how to manage staff, right? Like all of those humans. And so I think in my looking back, that's where things kind of really started to steer out of line as we were learning there. But then we figured it out.
I think mostly too was BCBAs, right? There was some expectation that of course you're going to have to supervise techs, right? But BCBAs, they have this certification. They have their board of medicine license in Virginia. Like, they must know what they're doing. And so I hear that often too, right? Like that first BCBA, a lot of BCBA owned businesses, they assume they're getting a mini me, right? And that's really not often the case. And so there is a lot of mentorship and, even time management skills, soft skills, like how to effectively train RBTs so that they somewhat enjoy criticism, right? Because that's a skill in itself. And then working with parents, right? Like I found at the time that a lot of our BCBAs would avoid parent training like the plague, right? Like that's the lesson. If I could do anything else, I will do it. And so it was like, how do we mentor them to give better services, or at least what we feel like were better services? And some other things around that was like assessments, right? Like you assume that, at least I did, they're going to know how to do a VB map and an AFL, is that right? And you hire some BCBAs and they're like, I do this one assessment. This is all I do. And maybe that funder doesn't allow for that assessment. So, those were the big things I think that we didn't, at least I didn't realize was necessary at the time.
Yeah. In terms of building the systems then to support those things, you're noticing all these gaps in areas that you didn't necessarily expect with BCBAs. And I think that makes sense, right? You expect, and I think this is sort of a field-wide problem too. Like you expect that this person who had those 2,000 hours is just ready to hit the ground running, but we all have different learning histories, and it's not actually true when you actually peel back the layers. And so in terms of actually building the systems to support those folks and to support your technicians, what are some of the things that you put in place, and or some things now that working with ABA businesses you're realizing are kind of common interventions or things that need to be put in place to support their teams?
I mean, depending on the size of the agency, right? But like a lead BCBA, a BCBA that has a very low or no caseload so that they can come in and mentor the staff, and they have the skills to do it, right? So they have those soft skills, they have leadership skills, they have the ability to train staff, right, effectively.
Well, I think even before that is as you start to delegate, right, whether you're like a BCBA owned company and then you're starting to delegate or starting to hire more BCBAs, right, and you're hiring office staff or HR, whatever, right, and you're okay, I'm at the point where I don't have to wear all the hats and I can start to delegate. It's really important to start building those systems out then, and think behavior analytically. Think just as simple as task analysis. You don't even have to learn business skills. You don't at this point yet, or making your own TAs for things, even if they're just on spreadsheets or live somewhere like a Word document or whatever. And then as you start to delegate those, or, you can pass along those TAs, or you can help them develop TAs for their roles. But I think it's really important early in that process, getting something on paper. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can grow and change and evolve as the position does, but making sure that you have those expectations and clearly, behaviorally, completes all paperwork. Well, what does that even mean, right? Really specifying, think of it like a learner and you're making a behavior plan or an intervention plan for them, and really specifying the ins and outs of exactly what is expected, and then making sure that you're following up and giving feedback along the way so that they know that you're checking in, and not even worrying so much about what those roles are called, but what do you need those roles for? And then what skill sets are needed for those roles? And then that helps you to be able to put the right people in those positions, but then also how to support them. Okay, this person's going to work well for this position, but there's still some gap in skills and I need to support them on that, just like we would on the clinical side of things. But yeah, whether it's a director, clinical director, or a case manager, or BCBA, lead BCBA, whatever you call it, having some clinical position underneath the owner as you're it's going to be the owner probably for a while. But as you're growing and shifting, and having that clinical lead, whatever you call them, that has the capacity to manage the team without having their own full caseload. Because I think having that dedicated time is really important. But then also on the other side, having that operations manager and having all of those systems, but then as Stephen alluded to earlier, having those plans of how the clinical and operational, how do they communicate, and how do you make those decisions as you grow? And I know a lot of times people are like, well, it's just going to be me. I'm a BCBA and I might hire one other BCBA and have a few techs, and that's really all we're going to grow. Well, even in that situation, if that's the case, it's still important to have these things written out and spelled out specifically in behavioral terms so that everyone's clear. I go back to my favorite quote, Brene Brown, clear is kind, right? Mm-hmm. If nothing else, you're being a great leader by being clear on what the expectations are, and then being able to give feedback and follow up.
Yeah. Do you have any frameworks? Because a lot of the roles that you described are really kind of core to like the service delivery. Do you have any frameworks or ways that you think about what sort of roles or tasks should be outsourced versus should be an in-house hire?
I mean, it really depends on the experience of the people that own the company, right? So I'll work with a lot of couples and, whether it's the husband or the wife that's the BCBA, maybe the other person has finance background or business background. And so how to do this, so we don't have to outsource that. But typically when I'm working with a BCBA owned company, it's like you have to get an accountant and you have to get an attorney and you need them right now. I don't remember who told me this, but it was in one of our AMAs. You never need an attorney in 2 weeks, right? Like you need an attorney right now. That's always how it is. And so having that relationship is so important. Someone that you can go to and ask a question and you don't feel like an idiot because, attorneys, I don't know, some attorneys aren't so approachable.
Yeah.
So having that relationship, and the same with an accountant, right? Hey, we're growing really quickly. So you have to be aware that you're going to have a larger payroll tax this quarter. So we have to prepare for that. Things like this, because those do happen. And then after those key roles, then it's like, what do you dislike doing, right? Like I have some BCBAs that don't like to do intakes. That surprises me. But, okay, then let's figure out who needs to be in that position to be able to do those effectively so that they're successful, right? So some people love to do marketing. Other people hate it, right? So it really depends on what it is that you like to do and what you dislike to do, or what you find difficult and don't have the time to figure it out, right? So, I mean, it really just depends. And so what we often ask when we're starting out is write your dream job, like, oh, perfect. Everything's wonderful. And I come in and I'm like skipping, right? Like, and what does that look like? And then what is keeping you from that job, right? Well, I'm dealing with billing and I have all these authorizations. Then you need a biller, right? So let's find a biller. So it really depends, right?
Mm-hmm. And as organizations are kind of growing, kind of one thing that I have experienced as also someone who's just kind of bootstrapped and, had done things on their own, is that you obviously then have to balance sustainable growth in terms of like, what can I afford? So like, maybe I don't want to do billing right now, but can I reasonably hire a biller? And so, do you have any ways that you help folks kind of figure out and prioritize like what to do right now, or how to prioritize the hires?
Yeah, absolutely. And so totally, this has to work financially for your company. But I will say, like, billing is a huge job. And, like this is one that we see the life cycle, right? Like BCBA, first 6 months, they have to do it, right? They have no choice. And they really should learn how to do it anyway. So, but there gets to be a point where, you're just doing so much and you're working 60, 70 hours a week. And it's like, yeah, you're saving, I don't know, $400 a month. But like, is this worth your sanity? Are you still an effective clinician when you're working 80 hours a week? Right. So there is that piece of it too. Like, can we get some of your life back? Is your family okay with you working 80 hours a week? Are you okay with working that?
Yeah.
So there is that piece as well. So we need to build the system so that you can get down to a normal amount of hours that you want to work. Again, some people want to work 50, 60 hours a week, and other people are like, I'd like to work 20, maybe 25, 30, right? So how do we get you there? And, putting in those benchmarks. Once you're making this amount of money, you have this level of quality services, right? And you're at this level of profitability, then we're hiring a virtual assistant. Then we're hiring, an intake specialist. Then we're hiring another BCBA, right? So those are the things that you want to put in place. And that goes back to the vision, right? That April loves to talk about is, what do you want this to look like? How big is too big, right? Is this a clinic and in-home? Is this just in-home? Are we adding speech? Are we adding OT? Are we, right? So knowing what it is that you want to build is so important. The other thing that I try to tell people, is how at the end of the day, pretty much everybody's going to sell this, right? So is this going to be a large percentage of your retirement plan? And if that's the case, then how much money do you think you need to live comfortably? And so then we need to figure out how big we need to get this so that we can sell it for that amount based on, so those are things that we look at to start. And I think a lot of BCBAs come into this and they're exit. Like, dude, I just started this 2 months ago. Why would I be thinking about that? But it's really important, because if you don't know how this ends, you don't know where you're going, right? And I think that is where the struggle comes, when you get to year 3. It's like, why do I continue doing this? This is awful. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we talk so much about vision for the business, but ultimately, as you're saying, having that vision for yourself, like, what are you doing this for? What is your vision for your life and how this looks for you right now within the business and then in the future? And one thing you said earlier, April, stood out to me in terms of just like giving services away for free or feeling really anxious when collecting payment or whatever, because I empathize with that a lot as someone who also just wants to do really good work. That is a key value and motivator for me, is like, I just want to like create value for people. And at the same time, it is a business that requires sustainability and requires me to be able to sustain my energy and things like that. And then part of that is being able to hire. And so it is this like growing and evolution process. In an ideal world, I would love to just like, keep doing good work and give it all away for free. But, what is the saying? The kind of cliche saying, like, no money, no mission. Like, if you don't have the funds to be sustainable, you're not going to be able to keep serving people. I'm curious how, for you, April, now, and for both of you, really, how has that evolved, or how have you kind of grown, and how has your kind of mindset around that evolved over time?
That's a really awesome question. It has grown and evolved a lot, because now I'm in a different position, but I'm still collecting payment. Like, I'm still charging for my services, and it's a different level. It looks different than it was. I kind of gotten okay with that on the ABA end of things. And then it shifted and grew as I'm doing more like consulting and coaching and all of that. But I think what I was able to do, it was a process. It was not overnight. It was over years. And it's still in effect. Like, I'm still learning and growing about this, but was looking at, okay, it's not about me. It's not about my worth so much. Yes. Same as you. Like, last night I was stressed out about a certain project that I'm working on. And I was like, I don't know if I'm doing a good job on this or not. And then of course I was like looking, okay, what can I do in the future to figure this out so I can have self-assessment checkpoints here. Right. And Steven's like, you're just expecting way too much of yourself. You're doing a great job. Like, you're doing everything. You're doing beyond what I would want you to be doing for the situation. But it didn't matter what he said, right? Like, I was still like, oh. And so that was a really good reminder of, I did the thing today and it was great and awesome and wonderful. And I came out of it feeling like I really provided value. I really helped this person. And then I'm like, oh, why was I so worried about that? And part of that still too is because there's a price tag. Like, I feel like someone is paying their really hard earned money for my services. I want to show up. And I want to show it beyond. So over the years have kind of learned and still learning to separate myself from that, is looking at, okay, it's not about me. It's not about my worth, in the sense that I already know where I stand for the most part. I already know that I'm going to bring quality and I'm going to work hard at it. Right. So I already kind of have that checked, and I have things to check in to make sure I stay there. But it's like taking myself out of it, taking my person out of it, and looking at like what that money is going to bring for the rest of the system that I'm working in. Mm-hmm. Like, for ABA businesses, I coach a lot of people for this very thing of like, I feel really strongly that you shouldn't open and run an ABA business if it's not going to be profitable enough to not just get by, but have enough money to then be able to pour back into your team to be able to provide training. Because I think that's one of the biggest problems that I see, is that as a whole, we're not putting our money back into the system for training, because I can't bill for training, right? And so to be able to provide that training to our techs and our BCBA, all parts of our company, even the admin people and the operations people. When I'm looking at that for ABA clinics, it's like, okay, so, rate negotiating and having your standard rate to an amount that actually helps you to pour back into your company, to be able to pay for this training, to be able to pay for staff, team building, and all of those things, right? And so for me, it's like helping with 3 Pi Squared is being able to help bring in that money to be able to pour back into our company to be able to continue to provide the quality services to others. I don't know. It's not a direct answer. There's not a easy button to push, but that's where I'm heading, is like putting it more into the values. Okay. And checking in with my values and checking in, but not making the amount so much about my worth. And then looking at what is that money helping to do? You know, how is it helping to support the rest of what we're trying to do within our system? So I don't know. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, it does. And I think one thing that you highlighted there is the way that as business owners, we can tie our personal worth so closely to our business and to what we're doing and, you know, our employee experience and things like that. And that is just a difficult thing. But at the same time, you mentioned one way or another, the business is going to end, in your experience with the business is going to end, whether it's parting ways and, you know, the business is no more, you do something else or you exit. And so how do you get people to begin to kind of decouple that and still pour into their business and their people in a way that is sustaining and creating quality, but not tying their own kind of personal experience? It's just hard when you're close to it. Like a lot of people make the analogy of it's like having a baby or a child.
100%.
And so, yeah, how do you think about that?
So my quick answer, and then I'll hand it over to you, is that just like parenting, and I know not everyone listening is a parent, but we do work a lot with parents. So hopefully this will relate, but they're different. You have to show up in different ways for different stages of your child's life, right? And I'm sorry, but like that first year of newbornness, it is hard. So are the 2 to 4. So are the like middle. My kid is 11 now, and I'm like, holy moly, I don't know if I'm going to survive the preteen and teenage years.
I don't know what I'm girl too. So
I don't like. I'm feeling the anxiety just like talking about this whole new level of independence, and they're starting to go out into the world without me holding their hand. And so I think it's very similar to what it looks like being a business owner. It's like each season that you go through is still hard, and it's a little different each time. And I know when we closed our company, in some ways that was harder than opening our company. I went through a major transition. I mean, we moved to a different country. Like it was the weird post-COVID times. Like, or in the middle of COVID, whatever, the 20 to 23, whatever. And it was like an identity shift, right? Because I think that it's similar to like maybe an empty nester, going back to the parenting analogy, like, okay, my kids are gone. They don't need me anymore. What am I going to do with myself? We ended up closing that company and being able to step away from it and be like, well, who am I now? What's my identity? And part of why I wasn't able to sell when we closed is because I didn't feel like it was good enough. I couldn't sell it. I could not. We tried to pass it over. Part of it was I couldn't let go of it. I couldn't give it to someone who wasn't going to do as good a job as me. And I didn't think it was good enough for someone else to take. It was such a storm. To say that I was like unstable was an understatement. And so as I look back to that, and we've helped other business owners as they're going through that process, and I have a bit of perspective in helping walk them through that, you know, I recognize more and more and more, it's so hard to decouple. And I don't have an answer. I don't know other than I do talk about work-life balance, although I hate calling it work-life balance, but people know it as work-life balance. So I refer to it as that, is making sure that you do have something outside of work that you can grow and build and enjoy. I'm sorry, it took longer than I expected.
No, that's fine. I think there's a responsibility of the owner. They have to build something that they can step away from. It still works. So there's that piece of it. But at the same time, like, I don't practice what I preach. So it is difficult. And business owners are typically control freaks. It's just the way it is. At least I am. And so letting things go is very difficult for me. I think for a lot of owners, it is very difficult. And because there is an underlying truth, right, that I hear all the time. If I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. And to a degree, you're right? You can delegate the task. You can have perfect work instructions. And, you know, it works great for 4 weeks. And then that person quits. And now what do you do, right?
You just have that drift.
Yeah. So like there is that underlying truth that you are ultimately responsible for what happens. So that is hard for a lot of people. So I try to give them practical reasons why they should do it. Again, if your goal is to sell this, nobody's going to buy it if you're working 80 hours because they're going to have to hire 2 people to take over your position, right? So there's that piece of it, and I try to tie it back to that. But again, also, owners shouldn't be doing the day-to-day grind in year 4 and year 5. They should be, how do I improve the systems that I already have? How do I improve the quality of life of my staff? How do we provide better services? So that's where they should be focusing on, right? And it is very difficult for a lot of clinicians to let go. But I think that is a normal thing for a lot of people. So yeah, it is difficult, and it is maybe some therapy would help, right?
I say often, honestly, I think everybody should be in therapy, but especially if you're a business owner, you really need to look into having a therapist or a life coach or someone to be there for you, right? Because it's important to take care of yourself too. And maybe you can even go to them with the goal of, okay, I want to still have my personality or myself outside of my business self or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of owners, this is like an extension of their life, right? Like this is so important. And the kids that they work with are not a customer. They're family, right? Like we have to do right by them. And so letting somebody else do that, that's not going to happen, right? So yeah, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of pieces. And then other people are like, I don't. So, it's a journey for everyone. Every story is a little bit different, but it's just, trying to, again, focus on what the end goal is. And if your end goal is 5 clinics in 2 different states, there's no way that you can manage all of that yourself. Mm-hmm. So we have to put systems in place because like you mentioned at the start, right? Like a BCBA starts a company and they're 1-2 years in and they're like, oh, wow, this is exactly the same place that I left. And it's as unethical and as low quality as that last place. And like, even if you're willing to have that perspective, I think that's great. That's a great start because a lot of people can't even admit that, right? So now at least you know where you stand and now we can improve. So yeah, it's a lot. And then you get partner relationships involved, right? Like I've worked with some companies that have 4 or 5 partners. Like, man, that is a mess, right? Like it can be a mess. And so some people are, you're not doing enough and I'm doing more than you. And, it just gets really sticky. So yeah, get some therapy.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a huge exercise in self-reflection and understanding. Similarly, I wanted to ask you about like your experience as like new parents and navigating, not even just new parenthood, but just parenthood in general in the context of business. I have 3 kids. So one is almost 11. The others are 5 and 3. My middle was 2 when I started the business, or maybe 18 months when I started the business. And then I had my youngest in the midst of all of it. And so similarly, like just it's a lot that comes with its own set of growth and reflection and trying to figure out your identity. And then you have the business side of things. And so I would just love to hear anything that you're willing to share about kind of your journey in balancing parenthood with this process, because I know personally it's something that can feel really isolating because they are so intertwined, but then can feel like you're kind of living a dual, like I'm wiping noses and doing school drop off. And then 5 minutes later, because I have no buffer in my schedule, because my time's so limited, I'm hopping on this meeting. And so I would love to hear more about your experience with that.
Yeah, the experiences. Whew. One of the things that I'm learning, because we have our one child and he's 11. And I think the biggest thing, I don't want to say I've learned, I am still learning. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I learned becoming an owner, I learned this, I think probably in year 2, was how to set boundaries and how to follow them. Of course, there's seasons again, right? But even with my staff, I started setting boundaries as far as like, we weren't on-call crisis intervention service, right? So there's no need to be taking phone calls at 10 a.m. from a flustered parent or staff.
10 p.m. you mean?
10 p.m. 10, what did I say?
I think you said 10 a.m.
Oh, 10 p.m. 10 a.m. I'll take it. And so I did. I had my first experience, and I've shared this before, but the BCBA on staff, and she was like texting and calling and texting late at night. And I had communicated the expectation that my office hour, I'm not going to be answering my phone after X amount or something. I can't even remember when that was, but I'd set that because that's important too. You do need to communicate the expectation. And then I stood by it. And the next day she was like, wow, I was really mad at you. She was like, but wow, you did that. Like, I respect that. And then that helped her to be able to set those boundaries with the families that she was providing services for. And then that kind of helped set the tone for our entire clinic. And we quickly shifted from that on-call fire pitting outing after hours kind of, except for Stephen waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning and waking me up about insurance. But that was a whole nother story.
Yeah, there was no work.
Well, I'm picturing that plus like newborn wake ups and like.
Oh yeah. It was not pretty. And I think too, one of the things is, so Stephen and I like work on these businesses together. But that also means, and we parent together, but that also means we've had to have some kind of understanding of like, we can't both be all in work or all in parenting at the same time. We've had to figure that out, right? For example, right now, the season we're in, our child gets home by 3:00 every day. And I started taking meetings and working up until about 5:00 every day. And so that 3 to 5, I was multitasking, right? He was getting home from school. He was getting a snack. Sometimes I would have that ready for him. Sometimes he would have homework and he would knock it out really quick, sitting in my office, feeling like he's working too. Other days he was like, heck no, I'm not doing my homework. And then knowing, of course, I mean, I don't know if you guys know anything about behavior, but like he learned really quickly what behaviors were going to get him attention during that 2 hours in the afternoon when I'm trying to juggle it all. I thought I can handle this. I can do this. I just have to tweak. I have to change. No, I had to recognize, I had to step back and say, I can't multitask these 2 hours after school. I have to be a mom or I have to be a business person, because if not, I'm a bad word. I am a not nice person.
All right.
And I am no good for anybody. And then I end my day just feeling like crap, just feeling like a really bad person. And there's that worth, right? So I had to say, okay, Stephen, my workday ends at 2:30. I go for like a quick reset walk, and then I'm ready for mom life at 3. Now, of course, there are occasions where we have to take a meeting, and, occasionally we can work that together. But then I had to tell Stephen, then I had to adjust. Then I was still trying to do the same amount of work, but 10 hours less. So, 2 hours a day is 10 hours less a week.
Yep.
And then I'm like stressing out, and I'm working after he goes to sleep. And I'm like, whoa, how did I get back here? Right. And I'm like, I can't continue to function like this. This is not okay. So then we had a conversation, and I said, okay, I need one day a week that I can like work the entire afternoon into the evening. So it's like Tuesdays, 3:00, his schedule is cleared for work so that he can do all of the afternoon activities and homework and bedtime. And so I have at least one day a week that I know going into the week that that's my day that I can do like a full load of work. And I have a lot of like focus blocks set. So that's just one tiny example. I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I do know there is that you were saying earlier, there's that level of like self-understanding, like checking in with yourself, like, what do I need? And sometimes we feel like, oh, we just work harder. Or if we just do more, we just put more into it, or we just get up an hour earlier every day, then we'll be able to fit it in. But what I'm realizing as I'm like nearing 50, going into the whole like hormonal shifts of life that brings, and going into these preteen teen years with my child, I'm like, I can't do it all. I can't do it all. And so that's okay. So I'm just having to try to make those decisions. And sometimes they're in the moment. And sometimes they're thought out and planned of, okay, this season, this is what this is going to look like. But then I have Stephen to fall back on. So that's part of the beauty of being in business with your spouse. There's a lot of downsides too, we've discussed before. But that is one of the things, is that we can share that load a little bit, and we can adjust. But I don't know. I don't know if that's helpful for anybody, but you do the best you can. And I mean, we're not superhuman heroes. We just aren't.
Yeah. I think more than anything, it's just helpful to hear that, again, because it can be so isolating. Like I've had a lot of the same thoughts and experiences, and even down to like, I feel like I'm falling behind or I'm not doing enough, or, and then I look at my hours of like, how much protected work time do I have where I'm not also trying to balance childcare, where it's not 10 p.m. or, when you start to really look at those things, from the lens of not only self-compassion, but just like realistically, what is realistic for any human? You are a human being, and what is feasible in that amount of time? And just, again, it comes back to that sustainability too, and that vision of what you want your life to look like. Because again, I can relate to like, you're trying to do it all. And then you're this like grumpy, horrible person that you're like, who is this? Why am I like snapping or whatever? So I can relate to all of that. And I think a lot of people that are balancing all of these things, whether they're a business owner or a leader in some way, or just even, anyone who is balancing parenthood and work. And it's a lot, or any sort of caregiving and caretaking. I know we're at time. I have so many other questions I want to ask you and hear about, but one last thing I wanted to just mention for folks, because we didn't mention it earlier, is that you just launched a book on May 13th, and it's called The ABA Business Leader's Guide: How to Start, Grow, and Sustain an Ethical ABA Practice Without Losing Your Soul. And so I think we've already kind of alluded to a lot of this throughout the conversation, but as just kind of a closing, I'd love to hear what led you to pick that title. Why was it important for you to frame the book in that way?
I mean, it's, we've already talked about it, but it's like the BCBA that started a practice because they wanted to do something better, right? They wanted to provide a better service for their staff and for their clients. And they get 2 years in and they realize that I am 100% focused on billable hours. I am not training my staff, and now they feel stuck. And there is a better way. We work with businesses all the time that are doing this successfully, and they're providing the services that they feel comfortable. Some of these are parent-owned businesses, right? And they are providing services that they would feel acceptable for their family. And that's what we all want, right? I don't think, I have to think this. I don't believe that any BCBA wakes up in the morning and says, how can I do something unethical? And, so I think most of us are here for the right reasons. And there are so many traps, and the incentive is so backward in this field right now, where you will make more profit if you have a less educated, lower trained staff, right? And have a very high turnover. And that, to me, it just makes me sick to my stomach. And so, yeah, I don't want to sell my soul. And when we were considering selling our company, we had the opportunity to sell it to PE, and we both said, no, we can't do that. That just wasn't us. Now, I'm not saying, hey, every PE is bad, right? But for us, that was a deal breaker. And so we would have rather just close and find a great place for our families than sell it to someone that everyone was a number. And that just wasn't for us. So that's kind of where the name came from, right? I think most BCBAs want to be able to sleep at night. At least that's, again, where we are at. So that's kind of where the name came from. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, it was so great having you on. I know we will continue to collaborate and have more conversations about all this, and we'll link where to find your book, your podcast, everything else in the show notes as well for folks. But thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for listening to In the Field, the ABA podcast. Don't forget to visit our website at www.sidekicklearning.net for more resources, our comprehensive fieldwork supervision curriculum, and continuing education opportunities. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to our podcast and sharing it with your colleagues and friends in the ABA community. Your support helps us to reach and empower more professionals in our field. Join me next week to continue to explore innovative practices and foster quality supervision in ABA.
Thanks for joining us on ABA Business Leaders.
We provide mentorship, courses, handbooks, billing support, credentialing, HIPAA support, web design, and more. Everything you need to build an ethical and sustainable ABA practice.
You can find all of our resources at 3pisquared.com.
Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with other ABA business owners.
We'll see you next time. And remember, you don't have to build your practice alone.